The day the news broke, the sky above every city on Earth seemed almost ordinary, but inside every home, office, and street, people felt a strange tension in the air. The Galactic Council had made a decision, and that decision was unlike anything humanity had faced before. From the start, humans had always imagined themselves as just one part of a vast, growing universe, that the idea of being told, in the most formal way possible, that they no longer belonged in it, was something entirely different. The announcement had been broadcast on every available channel, in every language, in every tone of urgency. Earth had been voted to be exiled, that no one had expected it to come so suddenly. For decades, humans had watched the Council from afar, noting their decisions, their wars, their alliances, and their cold, calculating ways. Humans had grown used to being outsiders, always studying the galaxy without truly being part of it. But this was different. This was direct, and it felt personal. Across the planet, from the icy plains of the north to the tropical cities of the equator, people stopped what they were doing to watch the broadcast again and again. The Council representatives, beings from hundreds of different worlds, appeared on the screen, their voices blending into one incomprehensible echo. Yet the meaning was unmistakable. Humans had overstepped. Humans had become too unpredictable, too powerful, too human. The vote was unanimous, with only a handful of abstentions in the streets. People didn't scream or panic at first. There was confusion, yes. Shock, definitely. But there was also a strange sense of clarity. For the first time, humanity faced a truth that could no longer be ignored. The galaxy, and all its infinite complexity, did not want them. And yet, somehow, humans did not feel defeated. Governments convened immediately, holding emergency meetings that were broadcast live to the world. Leaders, scientists, military officials, and civic organizers debated fiercely in rooms that were hotter than normal, not because of the temperature, but because of the urgency. Every voice seemed to echo the same thought. If the galaxy wanted to exile humanity, then humanity would not wait to be pushed. Humanity would take control of its own fate. And the determination in those rooms spread outward like wildfire, into homes, offices, factories, and schools. People who had never met found themselves united in a strange, unspoken way. Entire cities took to the streets, not in protest, but in conversation. Families discussed the news at dinner tables. Students debated it in classrooms. Workers whispered about it in factories and offices. There was anger, yes, but also an unmistakable glimmer of excitement. If the galaxy thought exile would hurt humans, it had underestimated them. If the galaxy thought they would kneel quietly, it had misread them entirely. The media tried to describe what exile meant. Officially, humans would lose all rights to participate in galactic trade, diplomacy, and communication. Their innovations would no longer be shared. Their colonies would be unrecognized. Their messages would go unanswered. In simpler terms, humans were being told they were on their own. But unlike most species in the galaxy, humans had a long history of thriving when told they could not. It was a part of their story, woven into centuries of conflict, survival, and perseverance. And now, for the first time on a galactic scale, that story was about to unfold again. In the weeks following the vote, Earth changed. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Factories that had only produced small satellites and cargo ships began to expand their operations, working day and night. Engineers and scientists who had been quietly developing new technologies stepped forward to showcase them. Some of these innovations had been in secret for years. Engines capable of traveling farther and faster than anyone believed. Communication systems able to operate without reliance on outside networks. Ships designed to support self-sufficient colonies. The galaxy might have dismissed humans as unready, but humans had been preparing all along. Even ordinary citizens found themselves playing a role. Young people volunteered for training programs, learning how to pilot ships, manage resources, and establish new settlements. Farmers and builders worked tirelessly to adapt their skills for new kinds of agriculture and construction, imagining life on distant planets. Families donated supplies, and entire communities came together to contribute their knowledge and labor. For the first time, there was a sense that every human, regardless of profession, could directly influence the future of their species. And yet, for all the focus on technology and logistics, there was a deeper change occurring. Humans began to see themselves not just as residents of Earth, but as members of a species capable of taking its destiny into its own hands. The vote of exile, meant to shame and limit them, instead became a spark. It ignited something older, something fundamental, the refusal to be constrained, the determination to push beyond limits, and the belief that humans belonged wherever they chose to go. The Council's announcement had also sparked conversation on ethics and philosophy. People debated whether humans should even seek revenge, whether they should simply vanish quietly or assert themselves boldly. Those conversations spilled onto streets, into media broadcasts, and across every corner of the Internet. While some argued for caution, most voices leaned toward action. Humanity had always faced danger, always been underestimated, and always found a way to survive. This was just the next chapter in that story. On the streets of the largest cities, murals and graffiti appeared almost overnight. They weren't angry or violent. They were defiant and hopeful. Images of humans looking toward distant stars, reaching for the sky, and holding hands across borders reminded everyone of one truth. Humanity was united in a way no vote could break. It was a unity born not of fear, but of choice. Humans were not waiting for permission. They never had. Even the youngest children, though they could not fully understand the politics, sensed the change. Schools adapted their lessons to include space science, leadership, and survival skills. Stories of exploration and ingenuity were emphasized over stories of fear. Every generation was being taught a new kind of pride, one that embraced curiosity, courage, and cooperation. The idea that humans could be exiled had unintentionally become a lesson in human potential. In government offices, leaders drafted plans in unprecedented detail. They calculated trajectories for interstellar travel, estimated resources for long-term survival beyond Earth, and coordinated with engineers, scientists, and military strategists to create a roadmap for humanity's future. Every plan assumed one thing: humans would not wait to be asked twice. They would leave Earth's orbit, venture into the unknown, and make their mark on the galaxy, whether the Council wanted it or not. Meanwhile, the Council itself watched in disbelief. From their perspective, humans were supposed to be humiliated, cornered, and restricted. Instead, they saw a species mobilizing with efficiency, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to obey a ruling they had no respect for. Council members whispered among themselves, comparing reports from their observers, and for the first time, many questioned whether exile had been a wise choice. And so, as Earth continued its quiet transformation, humans began preparing for the journey ahead. The world was no longer just a planet. It was a launch pad, a home base, and a symbol of resilience. Humans worked side by side in a way that ignored borders, politics, and disagreements. There was urgency, yes, but also pride. Every person knew that they were part of something far greater than themselves. The future of humanity. By the time the Council began sending messages, urging negotiation, promising reconsideration, and warning of consequences, humanity had already moved past words. Plans were finalized, fleets were being prepared, and the first volunteers were selected. The message back was simple, clear, and unmistakable. Humans were not waiting to be asked twice. In the months that followed, the news spread again, But this time it carried a different tone. Stories emerged of communities working together, engineers testing engines in orbit, and young pilots training for missions that would take them light years from home. The exile that was meant to suppress humanity had instead become a catalyst for innovation, unity, and ambition. It reminded everyone, humans and non-humans alike, that the species could not be controlled, underestimated, or restrained, and in quiet moments, people on Earth would look up at the night sky, imagining the stars not as distant lights, but as destinations. Each light was a challenge, a possibility, a new beginning. Exile was no longer a sentence. It was an opportunity. And humanity, ever defiant and ever inventive, was ready to take it. The day the vote was announced, the galaxy thought it had exiled humans. But in living rooms, streets, offices, and classrooms across Earth, humans were already planning their next move. Every mind was focused, every hand was ready, and every heart was determined. The council may have spoken, but humanity had chosen its own path. And that path would lead far beyond what anyone had imagined. After the vote, humans did not sit idle. While the council expected protests, anger, or despair, humanity responded in a way that surprised even those who had always believed in human resilience. Instead of pleading or negotiating, people began quietly revealing what they had been building for years. What the galaxy saw as a sudden outburst was actually the result of decades of preparation, innovation, and relentless effort. In cities, industrial zones that had once only produced small satellites or cargo, vessels transformed almost overnight into massive shipyards. These were not ordinary ships. They were the beginnings of humanity's own interstellar fleet. Engines were tested in orbit. Spacecraft were assembled in orbiting stations that dwarfed any structure the Council had expected humans to build. And every new prototype seemed faster, stronger, and smarter than the last. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but humanity had not underestimated itself. It wasn't just engineers and scientists who took action. Citizens of all ages and backgrounds became part of a new shared mission. Factory workers adapted their skills to build parts for spacecraft. Farmers learned to grow food that could survive long journeys in space. Students trained as pilots and navigators. Everyone contributed in some way. It became clear that survival beyond Earth would not be the task of a few, but of an entire species working together. Governments that had previously been divided by politics and borders suddenly found themselves united. Conferences that once debated endlessly about minor differences now moved swiftly to action. Plans were drawn to coordinate launches, supply chains, training programs, and communication networks. Every calculation assumed one basic truth: humans would not wait to be exiled. They would leave Earth and take their future into their own hands. The scale of humanity's preparation stunned the galaxy. Observers sent by the Council were shocked when they reported back that humans had already constructed orbital habitats capable of supporting millions, even before exile had been finalized. These habitats were designed for long-term independence, complete with agriculture, life support, and resource recycling systems. They were not experiments. They were practical, functional, and ready to carry humans into the stars. As news of the preparation spread, ordinary people felt something change within themselves. Fear was replaced by determination, doubt by hope, and anger by purpose. The Council's vote, which had been intended to shame and limit humans, became a rallying point. People began speaking differently, thinking differently, and acting differently. Conversations that had once centered on survival now focused on opportunity. "We don't need their approval," people said in homes, offices, and classrooms. "We just need a chance to show what we can do." The transformation was visible in the streets and skies alike. Massive launch platforms were built in cities, ports, and even deserts. Experimental ships were tested in open air before being sent into orbit. Engineers worked around the clock, and students volunteered to assist with research projects, showing an eagerness that surprised even the most experienced scientists. Humans began to realize, collectively, that they had the ability to do something no other species had done: create a self-sufficient civilization beyond Earth in record time. This collective determination extended to the military as well, though not in the way one might expect. While humans had developed advanced defense systems, the focus was not on aggression, but on preparation. Ships were equipped with navigation systems, resource modules, and life support technology. Strategy meetings were less about fighting the Council and more about ensuring survival and adaptability. Humans understood that the Council had underestimated them not because they were weak, but because they were unpredictable. And humans embraced that unpredictability fully. Even in education, the approach shifted. Schools encouraged exploration, innovation, and problem-solving. Students built small-scale space projects, designed propulsion models, and simulated life on distant planets. Young minds were taught not just science, but cooperation, leadership, and decision-making. Every project, every experiment, every lesson contributed to the larger mission of survival and growth beyond Earth. Humanity was preparing itself mentally, physically, and emotionally at the same time. Communication networks expanded rapidly. Humans developed ways to maintain coordination across continents without relying on the galaxy's systems. Satellites, encrypted channels, and advanced data-sharing systems ensured that no human effort was wasted. Communities that had been isolated suddenly felt connected to a larger, shared purpose. Every region of Earth became part of a global effort, and this unity fostered a sense of pride and determination unlike any the planet had ever seen. The excitement was contagious. People who had never thought themselves capable of contributing to interstellar travel suddenly found roles that mattered. Builders, engineers, pilots, farmers, teachers, students, and even artists discovered ways to support humanity's grand mission. Spaceports became centers of innovation, drawing attention from everyone on Earth. And everywhere, there was a shared sense that humanity was not waiting for anyone's permission. While Earth prepared, the Council grew increasingly uneasy. Observers sent back reports of humans working tirelessly, adapting technology, and achieving feats no other species had completed so quickly. Council members whispered among themselves, realizing too late that Exile had backfired. Instead of limiting humans, the vote had motivated them, focused them, and given them a sense of purpose stronger than anything the Council could have imagined. Meanwhile, humans themselves did not dwell on the Council's mistakes. Their focus remained on preparation, on learning, on improving, and on building. The species understood that the galaxy might oppose them, ignore them, or even attack them in the future. But they also knew one essential truth. They were ready to survive and thrive. No matter what challenges lay ahead. In the months that followed, humanity's efforts began to yield tangible results. Small reconnaissance missions were launched to nearby planets, testing technology and gathering resources. Colonization simulations prepared for long-term survival in space. Food production and life support systems proved effective, demonstrating that humans could live independently of Earth's environment. The species had quietly become self-sufficient, a reality that would shock the Council when it became undeniable. The process was not without struggle. There were failures, accidents, and setbacks. Ships malfunctioned, experiments failed, and sometimes morale wavered. But humans had always learned from mistakes. Engineers analyzed every error, improved every design, and shared lessons widely. Communities came together to solve problems collaboratively, proving that human creativity and determination were more powerful than any obstacle. The collective energy of humanity created an atmosphere unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Streets were alive with discussion and debate, while labs and factories hummed with activity. People no longer felt limited by political boundaries, resource constraints, or fear of the unknown. Instead, they were united by a single, unstoppable idea. If the galaxy wanted to exile them, they would turn exile into an opportunity. As this effort continued, ordinary citizens became heroes in their own way. Teachers who inspired students to explore space, farmers who adapted crops for long-term survival, engineers who perfected engines, and pilots who trained tirelessly were celebrated not for fame but for contribution. Every small act became part of a larger story, and every human realized that they were shaping the future of their species. Even children felt the shift. They built model spacecraft, studied the stars, and imagined themselves among the pioneers who would venture into the unknown. Stories of exploration, ingenuity, and courage became part of daily life, creating a culture that valued determination, creativity, and resilience. Humans were no longer just living on Earth. They were preparing to live among the stars. The Council attempted to intervene, sending warnings, recommendations, and diplomatic messages. They urged humanity to slow down, to reconsider, to negotiate. But humans had already decided. Their eyes were on the stars, their hands were busy building the future, and their hearts were united. Any message from the Council was received politely, but ignored. Humans did not wait to be asked twice. By the end of the year, humanity had made astonishing progress. Orbital habitats were functional, ships were ready for extended travel, and plans for the first long-distance journeys were finalized. Citizens understood that this was not just preparation for survival, it was preparation for freedom. Humanity was ready to take its place in the galaxy on its own terms. And no vote, no council, no obstacle could stop it. In quiet moments, people on Earth would look up at the stars and feel a mix of excitement and determination. Each point of light was no longer distant or unreachable. It was a challenge, a possibility, a new beginning. The species that had once been told it did not belong in the galaxy was now preparing to thrive beyond it. Exile had become a spark, and humanity was the fire. And so, the planet changed in ways the Council could not have predicted. People worked together as never before, united by a sense of purpose that extended beyond borders and politics. They built, they innovated, they learned, and they dreamed. Humanity had transformed a moment of potential despair into a movement of hope and The day the first fleet prepared for departure, the atmosphere across Earth was electric. People watched from rooftops, streets, and viewing stations as massive ships, built by human hands and ingenuity, lifted off from the planet's surface one by one. They moved with precision and speed, carrying millions of humans who had volunteered for the first wave of interstellar exploration. What the galaxy had expected to be a moment of weakness, a species trembling in exile, was instead a demonstration of humanity's readiness, determination, and unity. For decades, humans had been told to wait for permission. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and occasionally feared by the Council. But all that ended the moment the first ship pierced Earth's atmosphere. Cameras on satellites, drones, and public broadcasts captured every second, showing the world that humanity did not intend to plead, negotiate, or beg. Humanity was leaving, and it would not wait for anyone to approve their journey. The scale of the operation was staggering. Cities had been transformed into launch hubs, with massive platforms rising from deserts, coasts, and plains. Engineers and scientists worked around the clock, making last-minute adjustments to ships and systems. Volunteers coordinated supplies, ensuring that every journey could be sustained for months, possibly years. Families waved goodbye, not in fear, but in pride. Every human involved knew that they were not just leaving Earth, they were stepping into the unknown as a species determined to survive and thrive. Observers from the Council were watching. But their reports reflected disbelief and panic rather than respect. They had anticipated hesitation, confusion, maybe even protests. They had not expected entire fleets to be ready for launch, with trained crews, self-sufficient habitats, and technology far beyond what the galaxy had assumed humans could achieve. Council members whispered to each other, realizing that they had misjudged the very species they sought to control. The first ships carried scientists, engineers, navigators, and civilians trained for survival. Children, though young, were included in training programs to prepare the next generation of explorers. Families traveled together, often volunteering to establish the first colonies. These people were pioneers in every sense, yet they moved not because they were forced, but because they had chosen to take control of their future. The decision to leave Earth had become a symbol of human autonomy, courage, and resilience. As the fleet moved into orbit, the scale of humanity's achievement became clear. Orbiting stations that had once served as experimental platforms now acted as staging areas for interstellar travel. Supplies, fuel, and equipment were distributed efficiently, and the ships launched in staggered waves to ensure safety and coordination. Humans communicated using networks independent of the galaxy's systems, proving that even in exile, they could remain connected and organized. The first destination was not random. Teams of explorers had already studied nearby star systems, analyzing planets for habitability, resources, and strategic potential. Each planet chosen for initial settlement was carefully mapped and tested with small probes before humans set foot there. The colonies were designed to be self-sufficient, with agriculture, water management, and energy production systems in place. Humanity's focus on preparation and planning ensured that the first colonies would not only survive, but thrive. On Earth, people watched the departures with a mixture of awe and anticipation. Streets were lined with spectators, and live broadcasts captured faces filled with hope, determination, and pride. Teachers, workers, and scientists alike had contributed to the effort, and now they witnessed the tangible result. Humans leaving their home planet, not as exiles, but as explorers. The Council had hoped to shame humanity into compliance, but instead, humans were showing what they could achieve when pushed to the edge. Families cheered as ships disappeared into the upper atmosphere, knowing that those who had left were the first of many. Children waved, inspired to follow in their footsteps one day. Communities on Earth continued to prepare for future waves, building ships, training volunteers, and expanding habitats in orbit. The departure of the first fleet was not the end. It was only the beginning of a journey that would change humanity forever. Back in orbit, crews of the first ships faced the reality of space travel. Life aboard the vessels was intense but organized. Every individual had a role, from navigating through asteroid fields to maintaining life support systems. The humans on board were not just traveling. They were learning how to live independently from Earth. Daily routines balanced work, exercise, and study. Every hour was a lesson in resilience, cooperation, and adaptability. Communication between ships and the new orbital stations on Earth created a sense of unity. Even though they were moving farther from their home planet, the humans in space felt connected to every person on Earth. Messages of encouragement, advice, and updates flowed constantly. People on Earth celebrated each milestone reached by the ships, reinforcing the idea that this was a collective effort, a shared achievement that belonged to all of humanity. The first challenges were immediate and demanding. Navigating uncharted regions of space, avoiding natural hazards, and testing new propulsion systems required constant attention. Minor equipment failures tested human ingenuity, but every problem was solved quickly. Crews improvised solutions, sometimes using materials in unexpected ways. The unpredictability of space travel, which might have intimidated other species, became an opportunity for humans to demonstrate their resourcefulness. Colonization preparations began even before the fleet reached its first planets. Scouts identified ideal landing zones, and construction modules were prepared for automated deployment. Humans were not merely visiting new worlds, they were creating sustainable homes. Greenhouses, water purification systems, and energy modules were ready to support life immediately upon landing. The foresight and planning of humanity ensured that even the smallest setbacks would not compromise the mission. Back on Earth, the Council attempted to intervene. They sent messages urging humans to stop or slow down, warning them of dangers, and offering reassurances that their exile could be reconsidered. But humanity's response was consistent: polite acknowledgement followed by continued action. Humans had already chosen their path. They were leaving Earth, and nothing could stop them. The departure of the fleet had another unexpected effect. Across the galaxy, other species began to notice humans differently. Some observed with curiosity, some with fear, and some with admiration. Stories began to circulate of a species that refused to be confined, that could plan, innovate, and act with unprecedented speed and coordination. The image of humans as reckless or unpredictable shifted. Now they were seen as capable, determined, and unstoppable. Even within the fleet, humans were learning to trust each other in ways never required before. Decisions had to be made quickly, often without consultation with Earth. Leadership was based on merit, collaboration, and experience rather than tradition or rank. Every crew member learned to rely on their own judgment and on the judgment of their peers. Mistakes were treated as lessons, and successes were celebrated collectively. This was not just exploration. It was the formation of a new culture in space, one defined by human ingenuity and cooperation. As the fleet approached its first planets, excitement mixed with anticipation. Scouts had already sent detailed data about terrain, climate, and resources, but nothing could replace the experience of seeing a new world firsthand. Humans were prepared for the unexpected, trained to adapt, and motivated by the knowledge that their future depended on their actions. Landing sequences were carefully executed, and as the first feet touched foreign soil, humanity had already begun to plant the foundations of its new civilization. The first colonies were small but efficient. Habitats were erected quickly, energy systems activated, and basic agriculture began immediately. Humans worked in teams, each member contributing to the survival and stability of the settlement. Communication with Earth continued, providing updates and guidance while reinforcing a sense of unity. Every action reinforced the fact that humanity had not been exiled, they had expanded. Over time, humans discovered the true scale of what they had achieved. They had moved beyond the control and oversight of the Council, established the first permanent settlements on distant worlds, and demonstrated that survival and progress were possible even in isolation. The species that had once been dismissed as reckless, unpredictable, or inferior was now showing what could be accomplished when a population acted with unity, determination, and vision. As Earth continued to prepare additional fleets, the first colonies began to thrive. Humans adapted to local environments, experimented with new technologies, and learned to live sustainably. Each success reinforced the belief that humanity could survive, grow, and even flourish outside Earth. The decision to leave had transformed what was meant to be a punishment into a defining moment of human resilience. And so, humanity's journey continued. The first fleet was only the beginning, but it proved a point to the Council, the galaxy, and to themselves. Humans did not need permission. They did not need approval. They did not need reassurance. They only needed the will to act, the courage to explore, and the determination to survive. Every ship that left Earth carried not just people. The first colonies had settled on distant planets, but humanity's journey was far from over. These new worlds, while habitable, were not perfect. Each one presented challenges that humans had never faced before. The atmosphere might be thin, the soil might lack nutrients, or the weather might shift in ways that Earthlings had never experienced. Yet humans adapted. They had learned long ago that survival was never about waiting for perfection. It was about learning, adjusting, and moving forward. Settlers quickly discovered that cooperation was the key to thriving in these alien environments. Teams worked side by side, sharing knowledge, tools, and skills. Engineers built modular homes, while farmers experimented with crops that could survive with minimal water or unusual soil. Scientists explored the terrain, studying local minerals, climate patterns, and potential energy sources. Every person had a role, and every role mattered. The success of the colony depended not on a single individual, but on the unity and determination of the entire group. Despite the physical and technical challenges, humans felt a sense of excitement unlike anything on Earth. The nights were darker, the stars brighter, and the horizon unfamiliar. Each sunrise brought new possibilities. Children who had trained in simulators were now witnessing the real universe in all its wonder. They learned not just from teachers or leaders, but from the environment itself, observing patterns, testing ideas, and discovering solutions. Exploration was no longer theoretical, it was their daily life. Back on Earth, people continued to prepare additional fleets. Factories worked around the clock, constructing ships designed for the journey to these new worlds. Communities trained volunteers in advanced skills, from engineering to navigation to survival techniques. Every launch, every plan, and every piece of equipment reflected lessons learned from the first wave of colonists. Humanity was becoming a species capable of moving quickly, thinking creatively, and adapting endlessly. In the colonies, humans quickly realized that survival was more than just building shelters or growing food. They had to build societies. They created councils to make decisions, teams to solve problems, and communication networks to share information between colonies and Earth. Even in isolation, humans found ways to connect, to share experiences, and to maintain a sense of community. These small societies were experiments in human cooperation, demonstrating that even far from home, people could work together to thrive. The alien planets also offered surprises that humans had not anticipated. Strange weather patterns, peculiar mineral formations, and occasional life forms tested their understanding of biology and geology. Each challenge demanded innovation. Humans learned to design protective suits, build automated equipment, and create new methods of farming. Every success reinforced the idea that humans were capable of anything if they combined curiosity, determination, and collaboration. Even daily life became a lesson in adaptation. Settlers learned to manage resources carefully, to recycle water, and to conserve energy. Systems were designed to be self-sustaining, ensuring that even a small mistake would not threaten the survival of the colony. Children and adults alike were encouraged to experiment and solve problems together. Mistakes were not punished. They were studied, corrected, and used to improve the next attempt. This culture of learning and persistence became the backbone of human life on these new worlds. Despite the isolation, humanity remained connected. Communication systems allowed colonies to share discoveries, discuss challenges, and celebrate successes. News of a breakthrough on one planet inspired experimentation on another. Humans began to understand that being scattered across the stars did not mean being alone. In fact, it encouraged cooperation on a scale never seen before. Humanity was not just surviving, it was becoming stronger, smarter, and more united. Earth itself became a hub of innovation, sending supplies, knowledge, and new generations of settlers to support the colonies. People on the home planet felt pride and responsibility. Each launch was a reminder that humanity was no longer constrained by the Council's vote or by Earth's limitations. They were explorers, builders, and pioneers, shaping a future that was entirely their own. As humans expanded across these new worlds, they discovered opportunities that the Council had never imagined. Resources previously unavailable on Earth were now being harvested. Energy sources, minerals, and biological materials allowed humans to develop technologies that had seemed impossible before. They learned to harness these resources sustainably, ensuring that every advancement benefited the species as a whole. This ability to turn limitations into opportunity became a defining characteristic of humanity's new identity. The alien landscapes also offered lessons in resilience. Storms that would have devastated an Earth city were manageable with careful preparation. Unstable ground could be stabilized with innovative engineering. Even unfamiliar local life forms became part of the ecosystem, studied and sometimes integrated into human agriculture or energy systems. Humans learned to observe, adapt, and respect the environments they inhabited. Each challenge strengthened their skills, their knowledge, and their confidence. Over time, the colonies began to thrive in ways that surprised even the most optimistic settlers. Populations grew, infrastructure improved, and daily life became smoother. People took time to celebrate achievements, successful harvests, completed structures, or technological breakthroughs. These moments of joy reinforced the idea that humanity was capable of thriving anywhere. The vote of exile, meant to limit them, had instead created a species that could not be contained. Humans also discovered that life beyond Earth offered new freedoms. They were no longer bound by political systems, regulations, or social expectations that had constrained them on their home planet. While order and rules remained essential for survival, humans had more space to experiment with governance, education, and community organization. They learned to balance individual creativity with collective responsibility, creating societies that were flexible, adaptive, and resilient. Even the youngest members of the colonies played a critical role. Children were encouraged to ask questions, propose ideas, and participate in exploration. Their curiosity led to discoveries, inventions, and solutions that adults might have overlooked. Humanity's next generation was learning not just to survive, but to innovate, explore, and lead. The species was growing stronger in ways that the Council had never predicted. Back on Earth, society had also changed. People realized that humanity's success in the colonies was a reflection of what they could achieve when united. Communities became more collaborative. Schools emphasized problem-solving and creativity, and industries focused on innovation rather than competition. Humanity's identity was shifting from one of mere survival to one of exploration. Growth and cooperation. Communication between Earth and the colonies was not always easy. Signals had to travel vast distances, sometimes delayed by hours or days. Yet humans adapted to this challenge, developing systems to coordinate projects, share knowledge, and maintain morale. Even in isolation, the colonies felt connected to each other and to Earth, creating a sense of shared purpose that was stronger than any physical distance. As the colonies expanded, humans began to explore further. Scout teams traveled to nearby planets, testing conditions and preparing for new settlements. Each discovery, each successful landing, reinforced the belief that humanity could thrive anywhere. People learned to anticipate challenges, design solutions, and support each other through difficult situations. The experience strengthened not only practical skills, but also the sense of confidence and identity that defined humanity. The Council, watching from afar, could only observe. They had hoped that exile would limit humanity, but it had become clear that humans were not just surviving, they were flourishing. Colonies were thriving, technology was advancing, and the species as a whole was growing stronger, more united, and more capable than ever before. The vote that was meant to punish humans had, in fact, accelerated their rise. The more humans explored and expanded, the more they realized their potential. They were no longer bound by the limitations of a single planet or a single government. They could innovate, experiment, and create systems that suited their needs. They were not just surviving, they were shaping a future that was entirely theirs. The sense of freedom, responsibility, and possibility gave humans a confidence that no vote, no council, and no challenge could diminish. Even in difficult times, humans adapted. Storms, equipment failures, and unexpected challenges were treated as opportunities to learn. Communities worked together to overcome obstacles, and lessons from one colony were shared with others. Mistakes were corrected, improvements were made, and progress continued. Humanity was becoming stronger, not in spite of challenges, but because of them. As Earth prepared new fleets to send more settlers, the species was already proving something vital. Exile did not define them. The first colonies were living proof that humans could thrive anywhere. The challenges of new worlds were opportunities. The distance from Earth was not a weakness, and the absence of the Council's support was irrelevant. Humanity had discovered that survival, growth, and success came from unity, creativity, and determination. By the time additional fleets were ready to depart, humanity. From the moment humans began to settle on new worlds, the galaxy started to notice. At first, most species observed from a distance, curious but confident that humanity would struggle. The Council had expected humans to be isolated, weak, and dependent on help they would no longer receive. But what the galaxy saw instead was a species that thrived in ways no one had predicted. Humans adapted, learned, and built faster than anyone imagined. Their settlements were organized, efficient, and sustainable. They were not just surviving, they were growing stronger. Council members whispered to each other in worry. They had assumed that Exile would contain humans, keep them confined, and limit their influence. Now, reports came in showing colonies that were fully functional, ships that could travel long distances, and communication systems that connected planets independently. Humans were not just surviving in isolation, they were creating networks, forming societies, and advancing technologically. The Council had underestimated what a united, determined species could accomplish. As news spread across the galaxy, some species began to take humans more seriously. Merchants, traders, and explorers, who had previously ignored Earth, now sent small delegations to observe the colonies. They saw humans building thriving communities, growing food in challenging environments, and developing technologies that surpassed many older civilizations. Where other species had expected vulnerability, they found ingenuity, resilience, and creativity. Humans were proving that they could adapt faster and more efficiently than any other species. The Council attempted to send observers closer to the colonies, hoping to understand how humans had achieved so much. But humans were always one step ahead. Communication networks, early warning systems, and careful planning allowed them to anticipate problems and respond effectively. Even the smallest mistake was quickly corrected, and every challenge became an opportunity to improve. The galaxy had assumed that humans would be weak, but in truth, humans were learning to become stronger with every obstacle they faced. Humans themselves noticed the shift in perception. Where they had once been dismissed or underestimated, now other species approached with curiosity and caution. Humans did not respond with arrogance or aggression. They responded with their characteristic combination of intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation. They shared knowledge when it was safe to do so, demonstrated their capabilities through action, and let their achievements speak for themselves. Slowly, the reputation of humanity began to change from unpredictable and reckless to capable, resilient, and resourceful. On the colonies, people worked tirelessly. Each day was a mix of exploration, construction, and problem-solving. New territories were mapped, resources were gathered, and systems were tested. Life was challenging, but humans thrived in challenge. Children learned alongside adults, observing how adults approached problems, made decisions, and overcame difficulties. Every success reinforced a growing sense of pride and confidence. Humanity was not just adapting, it was defining its identity beyond Earth. Meanwhile, back on Earth, preparations for further fleets continued. Factories produced new ships designed to explore even more distant worlds. Engineers and scientists refined systems based on lessons learned from the first colonies. Communities trained volunteers in specialized roles, knowing that the success of future colonies depended on skill, cooperation, and readiness. Every action was focused on growth and expansion, demonstrating that humanity would not be constrained by the Council's vote or by distance. The Council watched, increasingly concerned. They had thought that isolating humans would make them easier to manage. Instead, humans had built fleets, established thriving colonies, and connected communities across multiple star systems. Reports of human innovation and adaptability caused worry and even fear. Some council members began to question whether their decision to exile Earth had been a mistake. Could it be that, in trying to punish humans, they had only strengthened them? Other species in the galaxy also began to notice. Traders who had dismissed humans as primitive now saw potential partners or rivals. Explorers who had avoided Earth began to observe the colonies with curiosity. Some even offered assistance or small alliances, realizing that humans were capable of becoming a powerful presence. The species that had once been underestimated was quietly growing influence and strength. Within the colonies, humans did not focus on the fear or judgment of others. They were too busy surviving, building, and improving. Each success strengthened their confidence. New systems were tested, from energy production to agriculture to transportation. Humans learned to thrive in environments that other species might have abandoned as uninhabitable. They solved problems collaboratively, often finding solutions that were creative and unexpected. Every achievement reinforced the growing reputation of humanity. As a species that could adapt and excel under pressure, humans also began to explore cultural growth. They established schools, community centers, and systems of governance adapted to their new environments. They shared knowledge between colonies, helping one settlement benefit from the experience of another. Humans created a culture that valued innovation, collaboration, and resilience. This culture became a defining feature of humanity's identity, showing the galaxy that humans were not only survivors, but also builders. Thinkers and explorers. As humanity's reputation grew, so did opportunities for alliances. Certain species, previously wary of humans, began offering trade, knowledge, or cooperation. These relationships were approached carefully, always with attention to mutual benefit and long-term sustainability. Humans were cautious, but willing to learn, showing that their strength did not come from aggression, but from intelligence, planning, and adaptability. Slowly, a network of alliances began to form that extended beyond Earth and the colonies. The Council, realizing the extent of humanity's progress, attempted to reassert control. They sent emissaries, offered negotiations, and tried to enforce restrictions. But humans were no longer limited by geography or dependence. Their colonies were self-sufficient, their fleets were capable, and their communication systems were secure. The species that had been exiled now held the power to decide when, where, and how they engaged with the galaxy. The Council's influence had diminished, while humanity's had grown. This growing influence did not make humans complacent. On the contrary, it motivated them to work harder. Every colony was improved, every system refined, and every challenge approached with determination. Humans continued to train, learn, and explore. Their identity was not defined by fear or aggression, but by resilience, intelligence, and unity. They were learning to thrive not just on one planet, but across many, showing the galaxy that their potential was limitless. The human colonies also inspired innovation in unexpected ways. Materials once considered useless on Earth became valuable resources. Energy systems were optimized to function efficiently in new environments. Transportation systems were adapted for long distances and varying atmospheres. Even agriculture evolved, with crops and techniques tailored to different worlds. Humanity had turned exile into an opportunity to rethink technology, society, and survival. Across the galaxy, stories of human ingenuity spread. Species that had dismissed humans now observed with caution, respect, and curiosity. Some began to reconsider previous judgments. Could humans, once underestimated and thought of as reckless, become a major influence in the galaxy? The answer was becoming increasingly clear. Humanity's achievements were visible, measurable, and undeniable. Despite their growing influence, humans remained grounded. They did not seek to dominate or attack. Instead, they focused on growth, exploration, and collaboration. Every colony, every fleet, every new technology reflected a species determined to thrive without causing harm. Humans were proving that strength did not require aggression, and influence could be earned through resilience, cooperation, and ingenuity. The Council, now watching closely, faced an uncomfortable truth. They had tried to exile humans, expecting containment and weakness. Instead, they had created a species that was not only surviving but expanding, thriving, and quietly building influence across the stars. Every decision they had made to limit humans had been met with determination, creativity, and action. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was becoming impossible to ignore. As humans continued to expand, Earth remained a central hub, providing support, supplies, and new settlers. Communication networks kept colonies connected, allowing knowledge and experience to be shared. Communities on Earth saw themselves as part of a greater mission, knowing that every action contributed to the success of humanity as a whole. This unity, determination, and sense of purpose became a defining characteristic of the species. By the time new waves of settlers arrived, humanity had already established a reputation that stretched across multiple star systems. Colonies were thriving, fleets were expanding, and humans were becoming a recognized force in the galaxy. The vote of exile, intended to punish and limit them, had instead demonstrated the full potential of humanity: adaptability, intelligence, cooperation, and courage. Humans had turned a threat into an opportunity, and in doing so, they had begun to reshape their place in the universe. In every colony, humans continued to explode. By the time the latest fleets were ready to depart, humanity had transformed from a species that had been exiled into one that was reshaping its destiny. The vote by the Council, intended as punishment, had instead become the spark that ignited a new chapter for the entire species. Humans had spread across multiple star systems, established thriving colonies, and built fleets capable of traveling further than anyone had imagined. What had begun as survival was now a story of influence, discovery, and ambition. On the new worlds, humans had learned to live in harmony with their surroundings. They adapted to alien climates, used local resources creatively, and created systems that were both efficient and sustainable. Where other species might have struggled or abandoned the land, humans thrived. They turned harsh landscapes into habitable areas, deserts into farms, and barren plains into communities. The success of these settlements was proof not only of human ingenuity, but also of determination, teamwork, and resilience. Communication networks connected Earth with colonies light years away. Humans shared discoveries, exchanged technologies, and coordinated plans for further expansion. Children learned about distant worlds as part of their daily lessons, while adults collaborated on scientific experiments, engineering projects, and exploration missions. Every success built confidence, and every challenge strengthened their sense of purpose. Humanity was no longer constrained by Earth or by the Council. It was becoming a species of explorers, builders, and innovators. The Council watched these developments with increasing unease. They had expected humans to struggle, to plead, or even to fail. Instead, humans were thriving independently, building a reputation for ingenuity and resilience that could not be ignored. Other species began to approach cautiously, some out of curiosity, others out of fear or respect. Humans were no longer simply exiles, they were a force in the galaxy. Despite this growing recognition, humans remained focused on survival, exploration, and growth. They were careful not to act recklessly or aggressively. Every colony prioritized self-sufficiency, safety, and learning. Humans experimented with new energy systems, agricultural techniques, and construction methods, constantly adapting to the challenges of their environments. They shared knowledge across colonies, ensuring that lessons learned in one location improved the survival and success of others. Exploration became a defining part of human culture. Scout teams ventured to nearby star systems, studying planets, moons, and asteroid belts. They tested new technologies, mapped hazards, and assessed resources. Every journey increased humanity's understanding of the universe, and every discovery strengthened their confidence. Humans learned not just to survive on these alien worlds, but to thrive, adapt, and expand in ways that had once seemed impossible. Back on Earth, society had also transformed. Communities that had once been divided by politics, borders, or resources were now united by a common goal, supporting the survival and expansion of humanity. Education emphasized creativity, problem-solving, and adaptability. Industries focused on innovation and collaboration rather than competition. Every citizen, regardless of age or occupation, understood their role in the broader mission of humanity. They were part of a species that was redefining what it meant to survive, thrive, and explore. As humans expanded further into space, they began to establish trade and communication with other species. Some were cautious allies, offering knowledge or materials in exchange for cooperation. Others were curious observers, learning from human achievements. Humans approached these relationships carefully, balancing cooperation with self-preservation. They did not seek domination or conflict, but they were fully aware of their growing influence. Humanity had learned that true strength came not from aggression, but from intelligence, adaptability, and unity. Colonies continued to flourish. Communities worked together to improve infrastructure, expand agriculture, and advance technology. Children and young adults were trained in navigation, engineering, and science, ensuring that the next generation of humans would be even more capable. Lessons learned from one colony were applied across others, creating a network of knowledge, experience, and resilience that strengthened the species as a whole. Humans also learned the importance of culture and community in sustaining motivation and morale. Celebrations marked milestones, scientific discoveries, and successful harvests. Stories of courage, innovation, and collaboration were shared widely. Music, art, and literature flourished in colonies, reflecting human creativity and spirit. These cultural achievements reinforced a shared identity, reminding humans that they were not only surviving, but building a civilization worth preserving and expanding. Even as humans grew stronger and more capable, they faced challenges that tested their ingenuity. Harsh weather, unpredictable terrain, and limited resources required constant attention. Equipment failures and unexpected emergencies demanded quick thinking and cooperation. Humans rose to these challenges repeatedly, proving that resilience, creativity, and collaboration were essential traits that defined the species. The galaxy began to take note. Species that had once dismissed humans as weak or reckless now watched with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and caution. Reports circulated about human colonies that were self-sufficient, fleets that were technologically advanced, and communities that thrived in environments that seemed impossible. Humans were no longer just survivors, they were innovators, explorers, and a growing force in the galaxy. The Council, once confident in its ability to control or contain humanity, now faced an uncomfortable truth. Their decision to exile Earth had not limited humans. It had accelerated their development, sharpened their skills, and united them as a species. The vote that was meant to punish humanity had instead revealed the true potential of the species: determination, ingenuity, and an unyielding will to survive and thrive. Humans themselves felt this transformation. They no longer saw themselves as victims of exile, but as pioneers of the stars. Every challenge they overcame, every colony they built, and every technological breakthrough reinforced the understanding that they were capable of extraordinary achievements. The sense of empowerment, unity, and purpose was stronger than any threat or restriction. Humans had learned that their destiny was not determined by others. It was created through action, intelligence, and cooperation. The first interstellar trade routes began to form. Humans exchanged knowledge, materials, and technology with species who were willing to cooperate. These interactions were cautious at first, but they demonstrated that humanity could be a positive influence in the galaxy. Humans had shown that survival did not require conflict, and progress did not require dominance. Instead, cooperation, adaptability, and intelligence became the defining traits of the species. Colonies continued to grow and expand. Humans explored distant planets, tested new technologies, and developed systems that were increasingly sophisticated. Agriculture, energy production, and life support became more advanced, allowing larger populations to thrive. Settlements became centers of innovation, and humans began to realize that they were creating a civilization that would endure far beyond Earth. As humanity reached further into space, they encountered new species, new challenges, and new opportunities. Some encounters were peaceful and cooperative, while others required careful negotiation or strategic thinking. Humans adapted quickly, learning to navigate social, cultural, and political complexities, as well as physical ones. Each encounter, each challenge, each success reinforced the understanding that humanity could survive and prosper in any situation. Even as they expanded, humans never forgot Earth. The home planet remained a hub of knowledge, innovation, and culture. Earth supplied colonies with resources, expertise, and guidance, ensuring that humans across the stars remained connected. This connection reinforced a sense of identity and purpose. Humanity was no longer scattered. They were united in vision, goals, and achievement. In the end, humanity had transformed from a species that had been exiled into one that was respected, influential, and capable of shaping its own destiny. Colonies flourished, fleets expanded, and humans demonstrated that resilience, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome any obstacle. The vote meant to punish them had become the moment that defined the species' future. Exile had become empowerment, challenge had become opportunity, and survival had become thriving. By the time humans had established a presence across multiple star systems, the Council realized that they could no longer control, underestimate, or ignore humanity. The species had grown stronger than anyone had anticipated. Humans had turned punishment into progress, threat into opportunity, and exile into exploration. They had proven that determination, intelligence, and unity could create a civilization capable of shaping the galaxy itself. Humans looked to the stars with hope, confidence, and a sense of purpose. Every colony, every ship, and every human being became part of a story that would be told for generations. A story of resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to survive and thrive. Humanity had not only survived exile, they had become unstoppable, proving that no vote, no council, and no challenge could ever define the limits of what they could achieve. The galaxy had attempted to confine them, but humanity had expanded,